You're tuned into the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into a story that's, well, everywhere. The trial of Sean Biddy Combs. Specifically, we're focusing on the testimony from Cassie Ventura. It's powerful and, frankly, quite disturbing.
Absolutely. And this isn't just, another celebrity headline that flashes past. This really digs into some heavy themes, power dynamics, alleged abuse, and even the language used in court, which can be confusing.
Exactly. And before we dive deep, let's just quickly talk about Sean Combs himself. I mean, his influence is undeniable, right?
It's huge. He's not just a music guy, Bad Boy Records, of course, but fashion, drinks.
Yeah.
He's built an empire. Understanding that level of power, that reach, is pretty crucial, I think, to grasping the weight of everything that's coming out now.
Totally. He shaped so much of pop culture for, decades? And based on Cassie Ventura's testimony, it sounds like that influence might have been, used as a tool. So our goal here isn't just to rehash the news. We want to unpack the context, look at the alleged methods of control, and think about the bigger picture, what happens when someone has that much power.
And the charges themselves. I mean, sex trafficking, racketeering, they tell you how serious this legal fight is.
Yeah, and the public reaction has been intense, shock, but also this sense of ooh, people have whispered about this. It really highlights that whole interplay of power and silence.
Right.
So our mission today, break down this complex situation, pull out the key points from Cassie's testimony, and maybe clear up some of the legal jargon you're hearing.
Well, just to be clear, as we go through these really serious allegations, we're looking at the information coming from news reports covering the trial. Our aim is to analyze and clarify, not to, take sides or speculate. It's about understanding what's being presented.
Okay, good point. So let's start at the beginning. How did Cassie Ventura and Sean Combs first connect?
Reports say they met back in 2005. She was quite young, 19, an aspiring artist. He was 37, already a major player in the industry. And he signed her to Bad Boy Records. A 10-year deal, I think.
Wow, okay. And then over time, that professional relationship apparently became personal.
Yeah. And it's really in that context that these first very serious allegations start to emerge, things like rape and threats about releasing sex videos.
That age gap and him being her boss, essentially, that power imbalance is there right from the start, isn't it?
Absolutely critical factors. If the allegations of rape and blackmail are proven, it points to a really severe misuse of that dynamic.
One thing that keeps coming up in the testimony is this term freak-offs. It sounds pretty disturbing. Can you explain what those allegedly were based on the reports?
Yeah, the court reports describe them as these lengthy sex parties, often involving male sex workers. Cassie testified she felt forced, essentially compelled to participate in them.
Forced? Wow.
And crucially, she alleged that Combs filmed these encounters and used those videos to control her. There was even a report he showed one on a commercial flight.
On a plane? Good grief.
And the court was shown, I think, 13 photos of male escorts linked to these allegations.
And Cassie herself said she took part hundreds of times.
Hundreds of times, yeah. And that she hated doing it, but felt like she had to, like it was her job. That's a direct quote.
That language, her job. It's chilling.
It is. And the prosecutor really hammered this point, saying Combs threatened to release the videos, keeping them like souvenirs of the most humiliating nights of her life.
Souvenirs. Ugh, that word is just awful in this context.
It suggests a real pattern, doesn't it? If true, it's systematic coercion, sustained pressure, fear, using film materials as blackmail. It points to a calculated effort to keep control.
Okay, let's shift to some specific alleged incidents of violence. The 2016 attack in the LA hotel seems particularly significant, especially because there's video footage. What came out in testimony about that?
Well, Cassie testified that Combs beat her, kicked her in this hotel hallway, and apparently security footage shown in court backed this up.
Right, I heard about the footage.
And then, get this, just 2 days later, they're at the premiere for the movie Perfect Match. Pictures were shown in court.
So putting on a public face.
Exactly. She said she used heavy makeup, sunglasses to hide a black eye, bruises. She even talked about hiding in a popcorn closet at the premiere to change dresses because she had bruises on her legs she wanted to hide.
Hiding in a closet. Wow, the contrast is just jarring.
It really is. And afterward, she said Combs sent texts claiming the police were there, that he was being arrested, which wasn't true.
Like a manipulation tactic.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
And interestingly, the defense, in their opening statement, actually admitted to some domestic violence in that specific 2016 incident related to jealousy.
They admitted it?
Yeah, but they strongly denied the bigger charges, the trafficking and conspiracy. It looks like a strategy, maybe trying to contain the damage to that one event.
Ah, okay, so acknowledge that part, maybe seem reasonable, but push back hard on the really serious stuff.
Exactly. It's a calculated legal move. Acknowledging something might make them seem more credible when they deny the charges that carry, much bigger penalties.
But her testimony included other alleged incidents too, right? Like one in 2013?
Yeah, she described an incident where Combs allegedly argued with her friends, then threw her into a bed frame, caused a significant gash, she said, above her eye, needed stitches.
And who arranged the doctor?
A Beverly Hills plastic surgeon, apparently arranged by Combs' security team.
Which, again, sounds helpful on one level, but in the context of everything else, it feels like part of the control, managing the situation.
That's how it's being presented, yes. Part of managing the aftermath, potentially keeping things quiet.
And there were even earlier incidents mentioned. Back in 2007.
Early in the relationship, she testified he hit her on the side of the head in a car, hard enough that she fell to the floor.
Okay. And then another one in 2011 linked to her dating Kid Cudi.
Right. She said Combs found out about her brief relationship with Kid Cudi, apparently through an email, while they were actually at one of these freak-offs.
Oh, wow.
And she testified he lunged at her with a wine bottle opener. Later, when she came back to talk, she alleged he kicked her hard in the back, left a big bruise. A photo of that bruise was reportedly shown in court, too.
And wasn't there something about Kid Cudi's car?
Yeah, the lawsuit mentioned Combs allegedly threatened to blow up Kid Cudi's car and noted that around that time his car did actually explode.
That's terrifying. The alleged escalation over the years, the threats involving other people.
It paints a very disturbing picture, if true. Increasingly aggressive, potentially dangerous behavior, according to her testimony.
And then perhaps the most difficult allegation, the alleged rape in 2018. This was after they broken up.
Yes, that's what she testified. They met for what she thought was a closure conversation at a restaurant. But she alleged he then took her home and raped her on her living room floor.
Oh my God.
She described crying, saying no. She also mentioned his appearance, saying he had black eyes and his whole demeanor had changed.
That happening after the relationship ended. It just adds another layer of alleged control and violation.
It really does. It suggests, if true, a refusal to let go, a continued assertion of power even after the breakup. Her description is deeply unsettling.
Beyond these specific events, she also talked about, like, a general atmosphere of control and isolation, didn't she?
Yes. She spoke about being aware of his capabilities, his access to guns, threats he'd allegedly made. She also testified he prevented his own son from seeing her when she had visible injuries, telling her to cover up bruises.
So actively trying to hide the alleged abuse.
And she apparently emailed her mom and someone who worked for Combs about threats he'd allegedly made, threats to release tapes, threats to have her hurt.
It sounds like a really pervasive pattern of alleged control, physical, emotional, isolation, concealment.
That's the narrative emerging from her testimony, yes. Yeah. A systematic effort to control and conceal.
There was also that incredibly shocking allegation involving urine during a freak-off. What were the details there?
Yeah, that was brought up in the prosecutor's opening statement. They alleged Combs made a male escort urinate in Cassie's mouth and filmed it, using the footage as collateral.
Collateral, meaning like blackmail material again?
That's the implication, yes, to ensure silence or compliance. Now, interestingly, the male escort involved, Daniel Phillip, testified too. He said Cassie initially asked him to do it. However, he also stated that Combs directed these episodes generally.
So there's a slight discrepancy about who initiated that specific act, but Phillips still points to Combs being in charge overall.
Exactly. It highlights the complexity, maybe the confusion, within such an allegedly coercive situation. But even with that discrepancy, the testimony still points back towards Combs allegedly directing things.
And finally, the settlement. She settled her civil lawsuit back in 2023 very quickly for a reported $20 million.
Within 24 hours of filing, yeah.
So why testify now after getting that settlement? What did she say?
Her statement on the stand was really striking. She said, "I can't carry this anymore, the shame, the guilt. What's right is right, and what's wrong is wrong. People aren't disposable."
Wow. That definitely suggests it's not just about the money for her anymore.
It speaks volumes, doesn't it, about the personal toll, a desire for accountability that goes beyond a financial agreement. It really underlines the potential deep, lasting psychological impact she's describing.
Okay, so as people follow this trial, they're hearing a lot of legal terms. It might be helpful to quickly, clarify some of them.
Good idea.
Like when we say Cassie took the stand to testify, What does that mean exactly?
It simply means she's giving evidence under oath in court. She's formally telling her side of the story, legally sworn to tell the truth.
Got it. And all these things she's describing, right now they're called allegations.
Correct. Allegations are claims made by one side that haven't yet been proven true in court. It's the prosecution's job to try and prove them.
And the people deciding if they are proven true, that's the jury.
Yes, the jury is a group of citizens who listen to all the evidence and decide the facts of the case in this criminal trial, whether the prosecution has proven guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
Okay. And the lawyer for the government trying to prove guilt is the prosecutor.
That's right. They represent the state or the government. They're the ones questioning Cassie to bring out the details of the alleged crimes.
And the lawyer defending Combs is the defense attorney.
Yep. Their job is to represent the defendant, Combs, and challenge the prosecution's case.
Which includes something called cross-examination. I heard that mentioned.
Right. After the prosecutor questions their witness, like Cassie, the defense attorney gets a turn. That's cross-examination. They'll question her too, trying to challenge her testimony, maybe point out inconsistencies, test her credibility.
Okay. And she gives all this testimony from the witness stand.
Yeah, that's the specific place in the courtroom where witnesses sit or stand to give their testimony.
And all the information presented, the testimony, the videos, photos, that's all considered evidence.
Exactly. Evidence is anything presented to the court to try and prove or disprove a fact relevant to the case.
We also mentioned her earlier civil lawsuit. How is that different from this criminal trial?
Good distinction. A civil lawsuit is usually between private parties like Cassie versus Combs initially. Often it's about seeking money, like damages for harm caused. A criminal trial, like this one, is brought by the government, alleging someone broke the law, and the potential consequences include things like prison time, not just money.
And that civil suit ended in a settlement.
Yes. A settlement is when the parties in a civil case agree to resolve their dispute outside of court, usually involving some kind of payment or agreement, without going to a full trial verdict.
Okay. And the big charges in this trial, racketeering and sex trafficking. Can you briefly explain those?
Sure. Racketeering generally refers to crimes committed as part of an ongoing criminal organization. Think patterns of criminal activity. Sex trafficking involves recruiting, transporting, or obtaining a person for commercial sex acts using force, fraud, or, importantly here, coercion.
And coercion itself means?
Basically, persuading somebody to do something they don't want to do by using force or threats. It's highly relevant to Cassie's testimony about the freak-offs, where she claims she felt forced to participate.
Okay, that lack of genuine consent. And there's also the burden of proof, right? That's different in civil versus criminal cases.
Huge difference. In this criminal trial, the prosecutor has the burden to prove Combs is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a very high standard. In her civil case, the standard would likely have been preponderance of the evidence, which basically means more likely than not, much lower bar. Understanding that difference is key.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. So stepping back from the legal details, this case is obviously about more than just legal definitions or celebrity drama. It really does seem to shine a light on those hidden dynamics of fame and power, doesn't it? What do you think makes this resonate so much?
Well, I think it taps into really fundamental questions about power, celebrity worship, and how abuse can happen and be hidden within those systems. Cassie's testimony, if true, is just a brutal illustration of the potential long-term damage. And it really underscores how power can create silence, how hard it can be for someone to speak out.
Yeah.
So the whole process, the pursuit of justice here, feels important not just for the people involved, but for like a broader conversation about accountability.
And, on a different level, just following this story is actually a pretty powerful way to learn real-world English, especially legal and news vocabulary.
That's a great point, actually. You're not just learning words from a list. You're seeing terms like allegation, testimony, coercion, racketeering, used in a real high-stakes context. It makes the meaning much clearer, much more tangible.
Yeah, you really have to listen carefully to the context, the nuances, is practical language learning in action.
Definitely moves beyond just textbook definitions.
Yeah.
You get a feel for the weight of these words.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. How do our own ideas about celebrities, the stories we already have in our heads about them, how does that affect how we view legal proceedings like this one?
That's a deep question.
Right. And what's our responsibility as people taking in this news to look past the flashy headlines and really engage thoughtfully with these complex and often very upsetting stories?
Definitely something to reflect on. How much does the celebrity factor influence our perception of guilt or innocence, or just our understanding of the facts being presented?
Exactly. Okay, so to quickly recap, we've delved into Cassie Ventura's detailed and serious testimony in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, looking at the core allegations and the crucial role of power dynamics.
We also touched on some key legal terms to help you follow the proceedings.
We really encourage you to keep following this case through credible news sources and pay attention to how language is being used by all sides. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive today.